This movie was based on a true events. An undocumented mother finds employment in a remote town known for its tradition of inviting outsiders to dinner. Charity worker Mary drives along country roads with Nina and her daughter Bella. Mary has secured Nina a job as a maid, which doesn't pay much but provides housing for her and Bella. Mary mentions that her employer is eccentric but that many undocumented women have worked for him without any issues. As Mary reflects on the previous women hired, Nina questions why so many were employed. Mary explains that the women saved money and moved on with their lives, encouraging Nina to do the same. Just then, Nina coughs, but reassures Mary it's nothing serious. Her daughter Bella wakes up and asks to use the bathroom, so they stop by the roadside where Nina helps her. As they return to the car, a wounded man suddenly approaches them, speaking in an unfamiliar language. Mary urges her companions to flee, and Nina retreats into the car with Bella. As they drive away, more people emerge from the woods. Nina wonders if they should help, but Mary advises against involving themselves with hitchhikers in America. They soon reach the house of Nina's employer, Luther. Luther mentions that he typically doesn't take in women with children, but Mary pleads for an exception since there are no other options. Nina assures him that Bella will behave, and Luther asks if she has any family to return to. Nina admits she has no family in Belarus, while Mary adds that Nina would be imprisoned if she returned. Nina then assures him that she is a great cook and a hard worker, so Luther agrees to hire her. After Mary leaves, Luther gives Nina a tour of the house, revealing that he is the town's butcher. He points out a deer head and explains that culling deer is a form of ecological balance and conservation. They honor the deer as a symbol of rebirth. He then shows Nina an old painting of his ancestor, a member of the original Pilgrims. To celebrate the town's founding, they will hold a harvest feast soon, and Luther invites Nina to attend. That evening, as they prepare for bed, Nina checks for cell service but finds none. Still, she appreciates having a warm bed with Bella. The next morning, she wakes up to find Bella already eating pancakes with Luther. Luther reminds her that cooking is her job, so Nina apologizes for sleeping in and joins them. Luther mentions that he added local roots and herbs to the meal. During breakfast, a thud from downstairs interrupts them. Luther dismisses it as raccoons and warns them not to go downstairs before heading into the locked basement. Later, as they walk outside, Luther mentions that he has never been married but is pleased to have Nina and Bella for company, adding that God is always with them. He points to the shed where he dries meat but forbids Nina from going inside. Bella finds a silver brooch with a deer symbol, but Luther claims it is not his. Later, while Luther plays music and cuts meat in the basement, Nina cleans the house upstairs. When Nina starts preparing dinner, Luther slaps meat on the cutting board, claiming it is deer. In the evening, Luther gives Nina a remedy for her cough, saying it is a mix of local herbs and roots. After drinking it, she feels lightheaded, and Luther suggests she rest for the night. Nina, feeling delirious, collapses on the bed but wakes up feeling better the next day. In the afternoon, Nina and Bella play hide and seek. Nina finds Bella in the closet and pretends to be a monster. Later, Nina delivers tea to Luther but coughs along the way. Luther pours tea for her, and although she declines, saying it made her dizzy before, he insists it will help her sleep and cure her cough. That night, Nina sleeps restlessly again. The next day, while Luther is away, Nina chops wood outside when a man with a tire wrench runs towards them. Terrified, Nina takes Bella inside, yelling at the man to leave. The man abruptly stops calling out, leaving them in silence. After some time, Nina sees Luther return from the shed with a bag of groceries. He announces a surprise for Bella, but Nina notes that her daughter is napping. Nina inquires about the man from earlier, and Luther invites her into the woods to teach her how to shoot deer. Nina hesitates to end a life until a flock of crows scares the deer away. Luther, disappointed, scolds her for wasting what he bestowed upon them and instructs her to use the gun the next time an intruder arrives. Later, Luther presents Bella with a dollhouse. Nina thanks him and embraces him, but then she sees the man from earlier approaching. Luther quickly leaves, and the man introduces himself as Andres. He apologizes for frightening her earlier, explaining that his car broke down and he needs to make a phone call. Nina moves to help him, but Luther attacks Andres and holds him at gunpoint. Luther interrogates him, learning that Andres is from Colombia and traveling alone. After a tense moment, Luther apologizes, explaining his wariness of strangers due to the town's seclusion. They invite Andres inside, and while Nina tends to his wound, Luther offers them tea. He apologizes for the misunderstanding and invites Andres to stay the night and fix his car the next day. Andres insists on leaving that night, so he asks for a phone call instead. However, Luther claims there are no phones and warns that it is dangerous to be out at night, so Andres accepts the offer. Luther takes Bella to bed to read her a story, leaving Nina and Andres alone. As they wash dishes, Andres sees a wine bottle and invites Nina to drink with him. He asks about her relationship with Luther, and she explains that he hired her despite her lack of papers. Andres empathizes, as his travel visa expired, but Nina interrupts when she sees someone wearing a deer skull near the door. Andres checks but finds nothing. Nina wonders if she is hallucinating and excuses herself for the night. In her bedroom, she looks outside and sees the figure with the deer skull holding an axe, but it suddenly disappears. She convinces herself it is just the alcohol and goes to sleep. The next morning, Nina wakes up alone in bed and finds Andres downstairs. They go outside and see Bella with Luther near the fences. Nina hugs her daughter but sees 3 figures with deer skulls that quickly vanish. Returning to the house, Luther informs them that neighbors will be visiting for dinner. Nina asks how he contacted them without a phone, and he explains that he drove out this morning and got the mechanic to fix Andres' car. Andres questions how Luther got the car keys, and Luther points out that they were left on the table. Luther then inquires about how much they drank the previous night, noting Nina's hallucinations and his own forgotten keys. He warns them not to drink his wine without permission but assures them he is grateful for their presence. He then takes Nina upstairs to show her a dress he bought for her. While fetching it from the closet, Nina spots an old book titled Order of the Children of the Sun. Luther suddenly scolds her for touching his things without permission but then hands her the dress, saying she will look delicious in it and urging her to put it on as their guests will arrive soon. Nina prepares for dinner, and that night Luther introduces her to his guests, starting with Brandon, who mistakes her for being affected by another country's war. Luther then introduces her to Samuel and Trish, and finally to Anna and Justin, who comment on her beauty. Anna sees Bella and calls her little deliciousness, prompting Luther to remind her of the rules. Meanwhile, Justin questions Nina about her stance on the war, and she shares that she protested against it, leading to her being driven out of her country. Justin dismisses this, saying war is inevitable as godless creatures fight over land. Nina is uncomfortable, and Luther asks Justin to drop the topic. Nina then takes Andres upstairs, and they laugh at the guests' insensitive comments about their countries. Andres invites Nina to leave with him once his car is fixed, so she can live somewhere less strange. Nina declines, as leaving would make her unemployed again, and she defends Luther's kindness in hiring her. Andres apologizes for the unexpected offer but reassures her of his concern. The two return to the guests as Luther presents a cured meat delicacy and toasts to a bountiful harvest. Andres asks about the harvest, and Nina explains it is similar to Thanksgiving. As the guests dine, Luther takes Andres to the barn to check on the car. Nina asks to accompany them, but Luther asks her to attend to the guests instead. Outside, Luther guides Andres to the barn, but Andres recoils in horror at what he sees before being knocked out by Luther. Nina, growing worried, excuses herself despite the guests' attempts to stop her. She searches for Andres outside but encounters the deer skull figure. Luther joins her, claiming Andres' car was fixed and he left. He suggests that Andres was involved in questionable business and it is best he left. Luther offers her tea and notes that her cough has disappeared, insisting he wants her to be healthy and promising she will feel great in a few days. Nina starts to feel dizzy, then experiences a vision of a barn room with the deer skull figure approaching her, making her flee. She finds herself lying on a table surrounded by cloaked people reciting prayers. Nina wakes up in her room, reassured that it was only a nightmare, and falls back to sleep. The next morning, Nina finds a red spot on the floor that resembles blood. Her gaze briefly lands on the locked basement door, but she dismisses her suspicions and continues cleaning. Later, Bella points out that the brooch she found matches one on her dinner dress. Nina takes the dress to Luther's room and discovers a chest with pictures of early pilgrims and their rituals. At the bottom is Luther's book, but before she can open it, she hears footsteps and has to put everything back. Downstairs, she hears whimpering from the basement door and recognizes Andres' voice but is interrupted by Luther, who scolds her for approaching the basement. Determined, Nina attempts to investigate the basement again after Luther leaves the next day. She hears a muffled voice calling her name from the door, confirming it is Andres. With the door locked, she grabs an axe and hides Bella. She breaks down the door and finds Andres tied to a chair with a bag over his head. Removing the bag, she is horrified to see Andres missing his eyes. Realizing they are in danger, Nina grabs Bella and drags Andres outside. Before they can escape, someone knocks her out. Later, Bella wakes her mother, who finds herself tied up in their room. Luther arrives with food in a bucket, taking Bella away despite Nina's pleas. After hours of waiting, Luther returns, and Nina begs for her daughter and to be freed. Luther promises to release her in time but insists she drinks the tea first. Nina hesitates, so Luther threatens to give it to Bella if she doesn't comply. With no choice, Nina drinks the tea and falls asleep. That night, Luther enters dressed in bloodied furs and an antler crown. He drags Nina to a bathroom and orders her to undress. Reluctantly, Nina complies and steps into a bathtub. She begs for Bella, but Luther complains about the presence of women with children and assures her they will raise Bella as their own. Enraged, Nina struggles, but Luther only releases her once he is done. He drags the sobbing woman back to her room, telling her he will return in the morning. The next morning, Luther arrives with a large breakfast, trying to feed Nina. Changing his approach, Nina begs to join his group, promising to obey. Luther declines, explaining that they do this because people keep invading their land. Nina argues that she and Bella could leave, but Luther advises her to follow his orders for an easier life for them both. Unable to resist, Nina disdainfully eats and drinks the tea, which makes her pass out. That evening, Luther prepares meat and sets the table for Bella and the neighbors, including Mary. Nina wakes up bound and gagged in a chair as the guests greet her. Luther leads a prayer about how their ancestors founded the town to avoid heathens and practice the harvest to cull intruders and prevent overgrazing. The prayer ends, and Luther reveals Andres' cooked head. Nina screams through her gag, and when Anna removes it, she vomits, ruining the dinner. The guests complain and say she should be purified again. Mary announces that they will continue the ceremony tomorrow, so Luther can clean up. Luther then takes Nina and Bella to the basement, binds Nina, and scolds her for ruining the evening before leaving to attend to his guests. After he departs, Bella removes Nina's gag and finds scissors to cut her binds. Determined to survive, Nina tapes a knife to her legs while Bella finds a gun. Outside, as the guests leave, Mary scolds Luther for bringing Nina, but he blames her for hiring a woman with a child. Mary asks about Bella, and Luther assures her he will raise her, as they do not harm the innocent. Meanwhile, Justin returns inside to get his wife's purse and is shot by Nina. The noise alerts Mary and Luther, who come running. Nina tries to open Luther's car door but fails, so she heads to the barn. Mary ambushes them, but Nina stabs and kills her. Nina and Bella lock themselves in the barn, but Nina recoils upon seeing the butchered meat. She protects Bella from the horrors, searches for Luther's car keys, but is confronted by Luther, who breaks through the door. He tries to convince her that this is for the greater good and warns her that if she tells the police, they will find her undocumented status and take Bella away. Nina points out that her undocumented status will keep her hidden from the police, so she shoots. Luther survives, and the gun runs out of bullets. Luther then locks Nina in a wooden box while Bella escapes. Inside the box, Nina hyperventilates but manages to force it open. Meanwhile, Luther finds Bella in the closet and Nina suddenly grabs him from behind. They struggle, with Nina being stabbed by Luther's broken antler crown. Luther kicks Nina down and strangles her, threatening to harm her daughter. In a desperate effort to save Bella, Nina pulls the broken antler from her leg and fatally stabs Luther. The enraged mother continues attacking in a frenzy. When she finally calms down, she finds Bella, who now sees her as a monster. Despite the torment she has endured, Nina escapes with her daughter in the morning, evading the fate suffered by many migrants before her.